giving their perspective. And the question was asked, were they invited, and why or why not? And so since we were just asked to come and speak, we didn't create the panel. I wanted to give a chance for there to be a response to that.
Okay. I myself did not know the answer to that. So I asked the question. And the response I was given was simply this, that this panel was put together to give factual information on their areas of expertise. It was not asked whether they were pro or con data center, but based upon their areas of expertise, they were asked to give us what they have on data centers, the effects, be it positive or negative. That was not the question. The question was, what can you tell us about data centers as it pertains to your areas of expertise so that we can know what is factual or not factual, how it will impact us as a community, be it health, wealth, peace of mind, or peace of heart.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I'll also share, there was a post there's a blog called Legal Planet that University of California of Los Angeles puts out. And there was an interesting post today saying maybe you do want a hyper data center. So I read it because I was curious. What this person argued was California has said no to data centers, and that's probably a mistake. Because guess what? They're going to go somewhere. And where do you want the data center to be? If you have data centers are being welcomed with open arms in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. And their response, and this writer's perspective was, guess what? They have the worst mix of greenhouse gas fuel sources for electricity of anywhere in the country. So congratulations, you've just taken all the hyperscale data centers and put them in the place with the dirtiest power sources. And congratulations, you've just taken them and put them in the states with the weakest environmental regulation. It's an interesting perspective, right? It's one that if you were to look at this issue as if we were a centrally planned economy like China, we might actually do something centrally planned, but we're not. Instead, we have 100 counties within North Carolina alone making these decisions, not to mention the thousands across the country. So it's a really hard question, and our question was, we were talking about what's right for rural Hall and for an area that is zoned residential. And that's a very specific and particular question to ask. I think one question for us to say is, to ask the panelists is, are hyperscale data centers per se bad? And if you were gonna have a hyperscale data center in Forsyth County, what would you want to see to make it acceptable? So, who would like to feel that?
Yeah. I will caveat, since I'm here representing Piedmont Environmental Alliance, this is an ongoing question and debate among our staff. We do not have an official stance on this yet. So with that, no, I personally do not think that hyperscale data centers are bad. If you're thinking about, my presentation spoke to just the larger ramifications of artificial intelligence. And I specifically mentioned, do we need them in our everyday use? I am landing more towards probably not, but there are some really good uses of artificial intelligence in the healthcare industry in particular, helping folks manage multiple chronic illnesses at once. Being able, now, do you want to feed your data into an AI model to do that? That's maybe, in this country, we kind of deal with that question as that's your choice. But you know, if you're managing multiple chronic illnesses, the research implications of feeding a large amount of data into a model like this and being able to see some of the overarching trends in a large data set could certainly be transformative, again, particularly in the healthcare space. So it's the pace and it's the inevitability that I would like to slow down a ton. It's just it feels like it's being forced onto populations that are saying, hold on, we need more information. And I think that everyone, particularly from a justice perspective, has the right to ask those types of questions and to get good, transparent answers. We're seeing a lot of NDAs going ahead of developers buying a site like this, and that is not a way to be a good neighbor in a community. If you say you're gonna come and bring jobs and bring tax dollars, I personally want to see that happen in a way that is inclusive and there's a fair process and procedure for that happening. If a community decides to, that they do want a data center, there are community agreements, the lawyers can help me with but there are agreements that a community can ask for from developers and from end users, to say like, hey, if we say yes to this, here's our list of demands, basically, of like what we need from you. That's the basis of a good partnership. Both entities being able to say, here's what we need from each other. And what we've seen already happening in places, particularly in Virginia, has so many good case studies, is that, you know, developers come in, they make people sign NDAs, they do not, therefore do not have to disclose who's gonna be buying this data from us. You know, is it gonna be Amazon, Google, or some other entity? And yeah, that lack of transparency is why I think a lot of us are getting really emotional about this topic, because it doesn't feel good to be hiding and kind of using smoke and mirrors to get your way. We wouldn't let our toddlers and kids do that. So why let a corporation do that in our community? So anyone else want to go to add to this?
I can just add on, and you're talking about community benefits agreements. That's the technical term. SELC is not anti-data center. We are anti-rushed, speculative, irresponsible, not transparent data center development in areas that are not meant to support an industrial use like a data center. So that's why we are opposing the proposed Project Iron Spur, because we feel that all of those things are happening in this case. But yeah, we're not anti-data center across the board.
I feel like that is a very difficult question to answer, but I just think about how historically we've pushed fast forward on industries, and now we're reaping the consequences of some really bad contaminants, like looking at PFAS compounds and how they're so profuse throughout our entire planet in wilderness areas where we wouldn't think there would be what we think of as industrial contaminants. So I feel like before we can answer that question of whether hyperscale data centers are inherently bad, we have to have more research, more information, more transparency to know what their actual impacts are to people in the environment.
My opinion of it is, I don't think we need a data center right next to an elementary school. Bottom line, we don't need it in town. We need it closer to the interstate. We need it far away in the middle of nowhere. And then that way, if it's gonna affect something, let it affect the middle of nowhere. There's too many of us that live near the site. I do. I know Carol does. A lot of us live right next to it, and we already have to deal with methane railroad tanks, probably 200 feet from my house. I don't want to have to deal with a data center. I'm worried about fire. So my thing is, like, is insurance going to pay if something happens to my house? Is, Montrose going to pay my medical bills? Are they going to pay me for my value of my home? No, we don't need that in our town. So I'm against it. Yes, things are evolving, but I honestly I don't think we need it in our town of Rural Hall, guys.
So it's fascinating to see this because around the world, Americans are known in the regulatory sphere as cowboys. So we kind of give it a try and see what happens, and then we regulate afterwards after we see what happens. Europeans intend to not let that happen. They're going to be risk averse, say no, and then later on let it happen. But you can also see what happens, right? The Americans get out front. We are known for our innovation, for our creativeness, and that is part of the American spark. which we also have to say. So it is interesting to see this play out, just as kind of an academic and someone who looks at systems. This is Americans being Americans. But I love it when Americans stand up and say, not so fast. I want to think about it. To that question, there's a question here about two things about water, Nicole. One, does the utility have pretreatment standards that address data centers in particular? And has EPA addressed this at all? Do they have pretreatment standards that people need to meet?
I don't think there are pretreatment standards for data centers specifically, but the county does have a pretreatment program that they have before they receive any wastewater from an industry, and it's part, if you're a significant industrial user, you have to meet certain requirements.
There's been a question about shortages. So if there's a water shortage or an electricity shortage, how do we get what priority? Do residential folks get first dibs on water and or electricity, which are very different questions, I think. Anybody want to take that one?
Everybody just needs to watch Alan Joines' video on conserving water back from April.
That goes back again to the community benefit agreement. That's something that needs to be asked to the developer before we can approve a project like this.
Yeah, and some of this comes down to negotiations with the utilities themselves, so the water utility and the power utility and the developer. So there may be some avenues to influence that, but it's not entirely clear. The county can also implement water conservation measures and drought planning measures that might be able to set standards for what type of water gets priority. And just a reminder, the county right now, I looked it up today, is in extreme drought currently, so. And voluntary water restrictions, so it's a really salient question and one that is important to be thinking about.
I just encourage everybody to go on YouTube and watch the mayor's video back from April about being a good citizen and conserving your water from April 1st to April 30th, and take this challenge and sign up. But we want to do that, just 3 months ago, but here we are, we're going to dump millions of gallons into a data center? No. Just saying, so make sure you guys watch the video.
As a matter of state law, residential uses in water do trump. So when push comes to shove, residential uses do take priority. That's just a matter of water law in the eastern United States. But the electricity, it really depends on the agreements between Duke and the users, and we don't really have transparency into that. So that's a more frightening question in terms of just not understanding how that would really work. Two questions here that I think are somewhat related. One is, what role can faith communities play in this kind of advocacy, and what environmental justice issues or concerns are presented by this proposed HDC? Is Rural Hall actually an environmental justice community? Is this really an environmental justice issue?
Good questions. Environmental justice community does have some definition around it. I do not believe Rural Hall is in that traditional definition. I would argue though that this is an environmental justice issue because we don't want to just hide things like this out in the outskirts of a community like Winston-Salem. I mean, where something like industrial use land goes is always kind of a question of environmental justice and making sure that the spread of facilities like this is, if not equal, just thoughtfully placed across communities, where we don't put landfills in the middle of cities or areas like the town of Rural Hall for a reason. And it's becoming pretty clear that hyperscale data centers are that kind of resource use. It's not something that you want in your backyard. And so if I don't want it in my backyard and Kim doesn't want it in her backyard, it becomes an environmental justice concern because whose backyard is it gonna go in? That's kind of the underlying question always when it comes to environmental justice. So while technically Rural Hall might not be an environmental justice community, there's always a question of environmental justice because we have to come to a decision as a community about where these kinds of developments go. And it's, to Casey's great presentation, multiple decision makers at the staff level of our government have said that this is not the place for this site or for this project. What role faith communities play? I can also take that. I do think that it is, they're kind of twofold. One, I think faith communities are always an important part of any advocacy campaign because folks who are faith leaders can speak to the underlying values and moral issues of a proposed site. So if there are any faith leaders in the room, I would implore you to go to the county commissioner meeting next week and give a public comment during a public comment period and identify yourself as a faith leader in your community and pose some of the questions that we asked here tonight. And then twofold, I think it is, again, to the larger conversation of do we need artificial intelligence in our everyday usage? Do we want, education technology in our classrooms? Do we want to be feeding all of our data into these huge models? What ramifications does that have for moral leadership? There's definitely huge amounts of roles that faith communities can play in this kind of advocacy.
Thank you, Jessica. Casey, one question here is why are so many data centers aiming at rezoning, especially aiming at residential areas? And I'm going to go to the question you just heard too. Why aren't these going on brownfield sites in Winston-Salem where we have hundreds and hundreds of acres of formerly used industrial sites? Not that anybody who lives there wants them either, but why is so much residential and agricultural now?
I'll take those in two. The reason they're not typically going on brownfield sites is because that would require the developer to clean up the site first, which costs money, and they have seemed hesitant to do so far. There may be data centers that are being constructed on brownfield sites, but certainly most of the time it's on what we call greenfield sites, so fresh land that hasn't been developed. No, I lost my train of thought for what was the first part of the question?
Why so much residential?
Oh, and residential, yeah. So this is something I think about a lot because we work a lot with our colleagues in Virginia who have been dealing with this problem for years. And a lot of the data centers are being developed there in city areas or in more, in where you traditionally expect these kinds of things. Whereas in North Carolina, I feel like most of the proposals are happening in rural communities and on rural parcels of land. And I don't know the answer, but my guess is that it comes down to a matter of where are these huge swaths of undeveloped land available in North Carolina, and those are in rural communities and on agricultural parcels or residentially zoned parcels. And then a lot of developers are applying for a rezoning because they're required to by law. So zoning laws typically restrict the type of industrial development of a data center on land that is zoned residential or agricultural in nature, so they have to apply to their local government to get it rezoned to that higher threshold that we use to construct that type of facility.
And just to add one potential reason why they're looking at these properties too, connection to transmission lines is important, and then their location being close to power plants already, the methane power plants.
So I want to take several questions. We have questions about should there be pre-construction studies on noise levels and air pollution levels? Can we talk more about the noise frequencies and how noise pollution really is a public health hazard? Just interesting note, an NGO that we work with at Wake Forest, though we didn't do this case, yesterday won a decision that EPA has to implement the Noise Pollution Act of 1972, which actually exists and hasn't been implemented at all since 1972. So, interesting fun fact, that we have a national noise pollution statute that's never been implemented. So we'll see where that goes. But the question I'm trying to get at is, what do we want to see from a data center? What, if you were going to have a data center in your community, what are the things you would want to see that you were sure had happened? And so not just for rural Hall, but we'll probably be hearing this again in Forsyth County and other counties are hearing it. So Kim, what would you want to see, and what, can you tell us a little bit more about the noise concerns?
What I think I would want to see if this data center was to come was noise buffers around the whole entire thing. Then that way the noise would stay secluded in an area right where the data center hopefully is not going to be. I personally feel like these noise concerns is going to be huge because how about our foundations in our houses? My house was just built with concrete foundation. I'm worried about my foundation of my home. The older homes in the area as well. The noise with them and the vibration and the children. I'm more worried about kids, honestly. Foundations can be replaced, but our children can't. The noise is going to be a huge issue too. If we're going to hear this, what about anybody here work night shift? 7P to 7A, you're trying to sleep during the day. You're going to have like tons of earplugs to try to sleep. So that's gonna be another huge issue for me with the noise concerns. But quite honestly, I feel like this is not going to be something that hopefully, well, let me rephrase that. This is hopefully going to be something that maybe we can, as a community, get more involved with, is having the noise buffers, having this built further, maybe up the interstate. Maybe they can purchase more land. But the noise control is definitely a huge issue. Am I an expert on it? Absolutely not. But just from talks I've had with people around the town, we would like to see noise buffers put all the way around, just like the interstate traffic. If you go down 74, there's buffers on both sides. And people that live on those houses, some that I know and work with, they said they can't hear the interstate. Maybe that's something that they need to consider for the town of Rural Hall.
Just one quick thing, this is a really pertinent question because the planning board did comment in their decision that they like the project, just not the site. So we're not gonna, this isn't gonna be the last try from a developer to get a data center put somewhere in Forsyth County. And like Scott said, there are other counties and surrounding areas that are dealing with this. So it is important to start thinking about, well, what would we want to see if this is going to happen.
I'll just quickly answer the first part of the question, which is yes, pre-construction noise and air quality studies are a really important aspect to this. That way you're comparing the current levels of various pollution to what the data center is adding, and hopefully if there are requirements in the zoning ordinance to limit noise and air permits that limit pollution, then you can hold the data center accountable if they're not meeting those standards.
Thank you, please, all Jeff Code, please report to the front circulation desk. All Jeff Code, please come to the front circulation desk. Thank you.
Paul, if you're here, you better. So one interesting thing that we're doing at the law clinic is to do a survey of whether there are best performance standards for data centers out there. Not written by all of us, but written by the industry itself. Because one of the things in the work I do, which is sometimes helping companies figure out how to do something, is to see what's the best standard out there and what can we hold them to. What's interesting is we haven't found it, which tells you something about what folks have said. This is going so fast that the industry itself doesn't know what the best standards are, which is concerning to someone who sometimes tries to help industry do things the right way. That I don't think they know the answer to that question, which should cause us to pause for a moment and say, wait a minute, if the folks who are doing it don't know what the best practice is, why are we doing it so fast? Not that why are we doing it at all. We have several different questions, and I do want to get to them about what happens next. So very basic questions of, Where is the public hearing on July 30th? Can I attend? Can I speak? And so that's number one. Number two, what happens if the council says yes?
Okay, July 30th is next Thursday. Public hearing is scheduled to start at 6 p.m. It is a public hearing, so you can absolutely attend. The No Data Center and Rural Hall organizers are have already picked presenters to speak during the public hearing itself. But directly following the public hearing will be the regular agenda of the county commissioners. And so there is a public comment period time where anyone can go forth.
That happens after they vote.
Oh, they're gonna vote already.
They will vote first, the public comment is to start the meeting.
Are we sure they're gonna vote right after the public hearing
That's the
and not?
way they would.
Okay, so typically they vote after the public hearing and then there's public comment. Deborah?
So this is almost like a bifurcated hearing. What is gonna happen is that there are gonna be two parts to this meeting. The first part is going to be the planning board, the hearing and decision on the planning board request, the rezoning, right? And then once that decision is made and handed in, whatever, then the second part of the meeting will be the regular monthly meeting. So in the first part of the zoning, we will have an opportunity, each side for and against the rezoning will have 30 minutes each to give a presentation. And so then after the decision is made, and there's a regular hearing. At that regular hearing, there will be a 30-minute period where people can go and speak as they signed up to speak. Any more questions?
Where is the meeting?
It's at 201 Chestnut Street,
Government.
the government center,
And the fifth one.
on 5th floor.
I'm sorry if I didn't understand, but are you saying that it's after the decision has been made and handed in that the public can be like, this is what we think about what you decided for the meeting?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
there is a time for people to speak before. But the No Data Center Rural Hall is going to rebut the developers' push for the data center.
Honestly, the best
Yes.
thing you can do is email the commissioners. And
Yeah, at this
That
point,
is
the
best
best thing to
thing you
do,
can do, because your chance of getting to speak during that period between the people in our group who are experts who are gonna be speaking and like hundreds of people who could wanna speak is gonna be minimal. So your best chance is to write to the commissioners, and if you didn't get a flyer, their addresses.
There are flyers in the back in case anyone's being here, and I will say from experience, emailing your commissioners is actually a really big deal. They read those emails. If you call, they will take your message, even if you don't get them on the phone directly. And they take that into consideration. So the best thing that you can do is call or email the commissioners. Someone had their, I had it on my and it's always great. It's also on the flyer. So if you want something to do with some free time this week, take a flyer, email your commissioners, call them, and let them know your thoughts about this data center. Okay, great.
One question for the organizers is, will the PowerPoints be posted on the website, the group's website? Because someone asked for that, and it would be very helpful to have, for folks to have the slides. And we're going to finish the slides, that's great. Another question that came up is what happens if the commissioners vote, well, two-part question. What happens if the commissioners vote no? What recourse do the data developers have? And is the county considering a moratorium?
Currently, the county is not considering a moratorium. We are gonna work on that after this decision.
If they vote no, then the rezoning to limited industrial is denied, and the land will remain as a residentially zoned district, so a data center cannot be built on it. The developer can challenge this decision. The standard for challenging those types of decisions is pretty high, but we've seen it happen. If they vote yes, the rezoning is approved. It is now limited industrial. The local government does not have any more say on the rezoning of that parcel. So they've basically said this hyperscale data center that you proposed can be built on that property. Again, that decision can be challenged, but the standard is fairly high. And there's a 60-day limit for challenging those decisions.
So this really is the time. If it makes it through this, your chances are really slim. What happens at this meeting is really where the rubber meets the road. It's very difficult to overturn the decision one way or the other. Is there something you wanted to say that didn't get said about the public comment?
I just want to reiterate, send your emails. The people who are gonna get up and talk are the people with the No Data Center Rural Hall that have been spending months and months doing this. They have a very cohesive message that will be against what the developer has put together. So even though everybody feels passionate about it, wants to have their word, the folks in the No Data Center Rural Hall really will be able to state it best. Thanks.
So we have another couple questions. Did you want to say something?
Well, I was just gonna kind of wrap it up, if that's okay. I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. We really appreciate all of the support from the community. Everybody has shown up when we've asked for people to show up, and there just isn't any better place than Forsyth County. And thank you so much to the Yakima Riverkeeper and Piedmont Environmental, SELC, and Sierra Club for doing a lot of work, but mostly thanks to the people of Rural Hall. You guys will not believe 2 meetings a week, studying, writing papers, calling. It's just the level of participation has just been amazing from the people of Rural Hall and the friends. So thanks to everyone, and thanks for coming out, and thanks for your continued support. Don't forget to write, very important to write.
I was gonna say, that is really probably.
And I forgot something, didn't I?
Yes.
The questions.
Oh, yes, and the questions that we did not answer will be on the website.
ruralhallinfo.com.
ruralhallinfo.com.
It's on the back of your sheet.
Yeah.
We'll have all the questions that were asked tonight and any that we didn't get to and the answers from the professionals. Yes, please.